And here we are. This is Afterwards. Thanks for being with us. We're going to talk about something that's a part of the fabric of the society, and if you're old enough to know where you were, I'm certain you know where you were when John F. Kennedy was assassinated. Now, if you think you've heard all there is to hear about it, I'll bet you're wrong. And we've got two guests who can tell us an awful lot about this. First of all, the fine young man on the left-hand side of your screen is Brian K. Edwards, a former law enforcement officer, instructor at Washburn University, and his partner in crime is Casey Quinlan, also a teacher at Olathe, a great school district, and at Washburn University. Thank you both for being here.
Thank you.
First of all, you are JFK assassination experts. Is that a fair?
Well, I guess you could probably say that. People have said that for years, but I've got 32 years of research, and Brian has 31. So, depending on what level of years you have, I guess the expert would be fine. I know that there's other people in that area and field that are well above us in that area, so we are still the secondary researchers in that area.
Let me first of all ask you each, why do this? Why pursue this for 32 years, Casey?
Well, part of it is I'm a teacher, and as a teacher in American history, I consider myself more of a historian than anything else, and maybe a revisionist historian. And I've also told my students that we're looking for the truth, and not everything in history is right out in front. We have to dig deep and do research and find some material that will support what is in our history books. And so we are in the process of not only accepting our history, but questioning history as well. And so for 32 years, my main thing was to get into the Kennedy assassination, and as a student in high school, reading the Warren Report, I found it to be kind of open at several ends, and I'm sitting there going, whoa, I don't really understand where this is going, but for 32 years I've in search of the truth, and that's where it's led me all the way through college and into teaching college.
And how about you, Brian? Why spend over 30 years pursuing this?
Well, as a law enforcement officer, Joel, I think for me it was more of a murder mystery. The significance of it is that the president was the victim in this case. Mm-hmm. I think just trying to delve through and plod through what the official version was versus what we know now, I think has led me to a lot more of investigative aspects in other parts of the case. I still want to know what the actual events, how they all came together. I'm not sure we all know yet. Where
were you when the event happened in 1963?
I was in second grade in English class at Overland Park Elementary School, and they let us out of school early that day and came home, and my mom had been watching the television broadcast, and we sat like everybody else who had a television in America at that time, watched the whole weekend.
Glued to it.
Yeah.
Casey, where were you?
Well, I was in 8th grade, and I was home. It was on a Friday, and I lived right in the Shawnee Mission area, and we were out of school primarily because I happened to be one of the individuals that sold World's Finest Chocolate, and and we did that to help support our programs at school. But I was out playing basketball, and my mother called me in, and I remember the time. The time was about 12:34, 12:35, because I remember Walter Cronkite breaking into As the World Turns, and it's pretty much been indelible in my mind for all these years.
You know, it's funny because I was a very little kid, but I was watching a Heckle and Jekyll cartoon, and I remember it's something cutting in. I mean, I wouldn't have known at the time what it was, but I remember my cartoon was being interrupted, and then all my brothers came home from school early. They all got out of school early and came home, and so even when you're a little tiny kid, you know, it was something so out of the ordinary. Now, the official story is one man shot the president, Lee Harvey Oswald. Maybe a Cuban sympathizer is one theory. Maybe he just had, he wanted to be somebody, and this was a way to be somebody, was to take out the guy. That's kind of the official story, or the psychological background that we grow up sort of accepting. What is your theory, Casey? What do you think happened on that day?
Well, I think for the most part, as a school teacher, I kind of attack this and present it to my students with the idea that we're not really sure what the truth is, and one of the reasons is that this particular case has never been brought to a court of law, and the jurisdiction is in Dallas, and it still remains in Dallas today. It's an open case. It's an open murder case.
It's an open murder case even to this day?
Yes.
Wow.
And so what happens is that we have we have a Blue Ribbon Commission that was put out by Lyndon Johnson, and to ascertain all the facts. And within a 10-month period, it was brought back to the American public, and we bought it. And I think part of it is that we wanted to buy it. We wanted to make things go on. We wanted to make things all fit in place and say, okay, fine, we'll agree for the president and go on. But I think what has happened is that if you really sit down and study what actually took place, at least what is available to the public, you'll find out that that a lot of what is in the Warren Commission is, I should say, the Warren Report is 90% a disagreement with the actual testimony and documentation in the Warren Commission, which is supposed to support that. And so if we're leaning in that area, we're leaning to the point that the Warren Commission documents can't place Lee Harvey Oswald on the 6th floor at that time. The rifle is definitely questionable. The use of the rifle is questionable. The number of shots is definitely questionable when you start to get into the medical evidence and the ballistics. And so what happens is that you revert to films, pictures, eyewitness testimony, and then science has to work its way in there. And then that's what we do as students. We try to pick apart about maybe 10 or 15 different aspects. And it's a pretty tedious thing in a classroom situation, but it gives our students an opportunity to look at all different angles of this assassination.
I just heard over this last weekend Daniel Patrick Moynihan say that when the cabinet was on their way somewhere, to Japan or somewhere,
right,
they turned around, came back, and he tried to get some cabinet member to send federal protection in for Lee Harvey Oswald, thinking he'll never live to get out of that Dallas police station. We've got to protect him, and of course he didn't live to get out of that Dallas.
No,
do you kind of, is it more than one shooter? Where do you come down on that?
Well, that question is usually asked after we give a lecture, and who did it and why did they do it. I think that's the hardest question to answer. I usually finish up by saying I know who didn't do it. Probably Lee Harvey Oswald.
Didn't do it.
I don't think he had anything to do with the assassination itself. One of the things that Casey and I have a tendency to agree on is the Warren Commission's reason for the assassination and pinning it on Oswald was that they could never come up with a motive. Usually political assassinations have a motive involved, but they came right out and said, in fact, it was Gerald Ford who wrote that there was no motive that the commission could find for the assassination. So, to me, if there's no motivation, then what's the reason for it? I think there was multiple shooters from multiple locations. This was not the work of one man. It was physically impossible. The ballistics don't match the films. The timing of the sequence of the rifle, the operation of the rifle, none of that fits. And we're finding that out more and more as we go along, but like Casey mentioned, in 1964 we believed it because we wanted to.
Right.
That was the main
Keep
reason.
things moving. Let's keep moving.
Right.
We're going to take a little break. We're talking about the JFK assassination with two experts, Casey Quinlan and Brian Edwards, and we'll be right back on afterwards. Stick around. Yeah, Moynihan was saying he was... even though it has been nearly 40 years, 37 years, and we're talking to Casey Quinlan and Brian Edwards. By the way, if you're interested in learning more, A Weekend in Dallas, Project JFK presents A Weekend in Dallas, where you go down to Dallas, you study everything you can study, visit the actual places, and learn more about this really fascinating time in American history. And you can contact Casey or Brian. Washburn University would be one way to get a hold of you,
Right.
or Olathe Public Schools for
Right.
Casey.
Yes.
Why is it important? Why should we care at this stage of the game who killed Kennedy, and what does it matter? Things did get back on track. Nothing significant changed. I mean, you can make a lot of what ifs. Well, if he had lived, we'd never gone to Vietnam. If he had lived, race relations would have been better. Those are all hypothetical. Why care?
I think, you know, as a young historian, I've always been seeking the truth, and when I present that to my students in history classes or government classes or contemporary issues classes, I want them to seek the truth, and I want them to ask some questions, and sometimes they come up with some really hard questions, and I don't have answers for them. And at the same time, I think the truth is important to us, to at least know what actually took place down there, and so that we can maybe put an end to our all the theories. And there are a lot of theories out there, and some of them are just fantastic. One of the most fantastic is the Warren Report. If anybody would sit down and really read that, it's almost like what Bertrand Russell said was a tissue of lies. And by the way, the Warren report has been thrown out of 4 courts of law as hearsay, innuendo, and non-fact. So I kind of get in arguments sometimes with several professors, but I say, you know, I'm not directly advocating conspiracy. What I'm advocating is the truth. And if the truth leads us down the line of conspiracies, then, well, then let's go there.
Mm-hmm. If hand over some of these things, I'm going to show
Sure.
a few of them, but as we, there are some that I won't show. They're too gruesome
Absolutely.
to show. As we show this, talk a little bit about what some of those theories are, Brian. You know, when I was a little kid, one thing my brother had me believing for a while was that John F. Kennedy was not really dead. That he had become a vegetable. They
Right.
put him on an island, on Onassis'
Right,
island.
exactly.
And that he was
Yeah.
still alive, but they didn't want, obviously from some of the pictures you brought today, that's not the case. But it's one of those things that latches on if you don't have a real answer.
Right, right. Well, I'm pretty sure, 99.9% sure that President Kennedy was assassinated on Elm Street in Dallas, Texas on the 22nd of November.
Right.
After that, I'm not real sure. There's a lot of things that have been coming out. The picture that
That's
you just
Oswald.
saw, yeah. Well, we're not real sure about that either.
Really, that this
Yeah.
may not be Oswald.
He was shown a picture very similar to that, and said that was his head pasted on top of somebody else's body. And it's been
Really?
analyzed multiple times by very prominent photo researchers, and it's been pretty clear that the photo manipulation part of it was part of the show to implicate him.
Right.
Yeah.
Now this is, we were talking about Project JFK. This is a picture of some of the students that went down apparently in November
Yeah, just November this year.
Right. We
to Dealey Plaza.
We took about 14 to 16 students to Dealey Plaza. There was a national convention down there, and Brian and I are members of the Lancer convention down there. And so we had the opportunity to take these students down there, and they got to see firsthand some real research that was going on, writers, and also got to meet some live eyewitnesses that are still alive after 37 years. So it was a history come alive for them.
Jason Ball, I think, is the son of one of our photographers.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, that's right.
So
That's
a
right.
picture of him. Now is this the day they arrived
Yes.
in?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, it's about 11:40 in the morning on Friday.
And that's at Love Field, and they've just departed Air Force One.
And that's the day they arrived, and then of course that pink suit just became covered with blood.
Yes.
And the famous Zapruder film, which shows her crawling out in the back. Do you have any explanation for what she thought she was doing?
Well,
Crawling out in the back of the car?
You know, Joe, I've been asked that a lot, and we've looked at the Zapruder film for different angles, and Zapruder is not the only person who took film, but his is probably one of the famous. From the angle that we look at, and we look at her testimony that was locked up for 10 years, and also from other eyewitnesses who were in and around there, and also Clint Hill, who's
The Secret Service man who tried to jump up on the back.
Sure, and by the way, Clint Hill is Jackie Kennedy's, or at least at that particular time, was her personal bodyguard. And it's interesting because JFK's personal bodyguard, Secret Service agent Ryupka, is left at the airport, Love Airfield.
So he's not even in the movie.
Yeah, and we see that in films. But I really think that Jackie was reacting as quick as she possibly could within a shock type situation, and she even said so herself. She was trying to hold on the back of his head, but the back of his head flew off and landed on the trunk. And then if you watch and slow the film down, you'll see that she braces herself with her right hand and scoops something up with her left. And it's a kind of a grotesque scene, obviously, but she has something clutched in her hand, and even the doctors at Parkland Hospital mentioned that when she was walking around Trauma Room 1, she had something in her hand, and then she nudged one of them and gave them the back of the
And Clint
president's head.
Hill's life was destroyed too after this.
Absolutely.
He just blamed himself. I remember seeing an interview with him, maybe it was the 20th or 25th anniversary of the assassination, and he was just beside himself to that day.
Because he felt that had he been another 2 or 3 seconds earlier, he may have been able to save the president's life. And that haunted him forever until he died.
Now we have in this picture Big John Connolly.
Oh, yeah.
A towering figure of Texas politics and national politics too, and standing there with Casey. Now tell me a little bit about what people, there's Big John, what do people, now he's passed away,
Right.
but what did he think of all the theories? What did he think happened? He was there in the car.
Well, I think to begin with, Governor Connolly said that he was hit with a a second shot, that he heard a second shot, and that he says the second one definitely hit him and that the first one didn't. And so he is saying that there was a second shot. Now, just by his testimony, if you put that into context in the context of the Warren Commission and the Warren Report says that there were 3 shots and 2 hits. Conley says that he was hit with a second shot, meaning that that there has to be somebody else firing from behind. So what happens is that by his testimony, he is saying that there are 2 shooters. The Warren Commission couldn't have 2 shooters because, number one, whatever physical evidence they had found up on the 6th floor only led to 1. And so the timing of the rifle and the shots that were fired out of there could only have taken place within 3.2 seconds of each other. And so what happens is that they have to come up with a theory, and the theory is the single bullet theory.
His magic bullet.
That's a magic bullet, and it travels all over the place.
We're going to take a little break. We're talking about the Kennedy assassination, and we'll be right back in afterwards to talk some more about that. I think even before JFK, the movie, Kennedy, and this is the Saturday Evening Post, the memorial edition after his assassination. What were you telling me? I'm going to find it here while you talk about it.
The bottom picture there. No, it's this.
What am I looking for?
Right.
This one?
Yes.
That one right there.
All right. What is that we're looking at?
That picture was in the memorial issue of Post magazine, and the caption reads something like, was it showing an easy shot from for the assassin at the tragedy, time of the tragedy.
Right, from the 6th floor of the book depository.
The problem is that there's 2 things wrong with it. First, it's not from the 6th floor of any building, and second, it's not the Texas School Book Depository, it's the Dow Tex building, which is right behind. So I'm not sure if they either had their information wrong or they did this on purpose, but
it's part of the effort to reassure the United States we know what happened.
Right, that's the wrong place.
What do you think of the movie? I've never seen the movie JFK. It came in for an awful lot of criticism from scholars and politicians and people who said, this is irresponsible. I'm getting the sense that the two of you, your basic idea is Oswald probably didn't do it. Somebody else or several other people did do it. We may never know why, we may never know how, but you're going to keep trying to find out. What do you think of the movie, JFK?
I thought the movie was as accurate as you can get based on the information that's available to the general public.
Really?
Oliver Stone took a lot of his information. In fact, every testimony or every statement by a witness is actual transcript from their testimony or their depositions given the Warren Commission. Some of the other information is speculation on his part. I'm not sure where he got a lot of the information, but for the most part, it's about 90% accurate.
We only have about a minute and a half, Casey. Is there anybody still alive who could come forward and say, okay, here's the real story? Because Johnson's dead, Connolly's dead, who's still around?
Well, I can remember in college where several of my history professors said that you don't need to do research on this because this is still very young and it's not really history. History backed up 50 to 100 years. And they said, you're going to have to wait until all this material comes out. Well, they were probably telling me some good information because all the material is not out. As for who might have access to maybe those particular answers, we're not really sure, but we have to believe that our United States government has things locked in the National Archives. And I would fall back as a history teacher and say, let's look in the National Archives. Give us an opportunity to look in there and to do research in there and come up with some plausible answers. Because if Lee Harvey Oswald is the actual assassin, then show me. I was born in Missouri, so let's just say show me.
Show me.
And right now, we think that there's enough hard evidence out there to warrant that there was more than one shooter and that it precludes Lee Harvey Oswald at this particular time.
And Jackie Kennedy is dead now, which I think a lot of people felt, let's not mess with this while she was still living. We've got about 30 seconds left in here. Let me just ask you and tell me if you think it's credible. Or credible theories. Was he killed because of his activity in civil rights? Was that a plausible theory?
It's plausible.
Killed because of his activity with Cuba. Plausible theory?
Yes.
Yes.
Definitely.
Killed because there are just a lot of wealthy businessmen in Texas didn't want him alive.
Yes.
Plausible?
Yes.
So all of these things are plausible theories for why they would basically take him out.
Right.
weird stuff.
Yeah.
It is.
We're going to take a little break. We got a couple more minutes left to talk about this, but we could talk forever and ever. If you want to talk more about it, we'll tell you how you can get involved in the project as well. We'll be back in a minute. She's not out of breath or anything.
Police officer.
Well, we're back. We just got too many theories. We're talking about Project JFK and the John F. Kennedy assassination. We only have a couple of minutes left. I want to tell you, first of all, you can take part February 16th of 2001, the 37th anniversary tour and study, and if you want to really get into this subject and learn as a lot of what these guys have been studying for years, over 3 decades in both cases, you can get a hold of Casey Quinlan at 913-764-2827. I'm just going to give the one number so we don't confuse with a lot of numbers. 913-764-2827. Got about a minute left. What would you tell people in 30 seconds, to give you each 30 seconds, what would you tell them, Brian, about what you want them to know about this, about the JFK assassination?
I would think one of the parting shots would be just question what's being told to you. I'm not sure if we'll ever know the truth, but I'm going to try to keep finding it. My goal is to get the information out of the archives, and so we can all make our own decision. Tell me if they solved it in 9 months, then show me the information.
About 30 seconds. What would you tell them, Casey?
Well, first of all, we purport to live in a democratic society, and as a teacher, I show them the Constitution, and I tell my students that you should use the Constitution. So one of the very first amendments is the freedom of speech.
Right.
Ask the question. Find out what's going on in your government. Get involved in your government. And this election year was an excellent year to at least get involved in that.
Right.
But as for the Kennedy assassination, it's an unsolved mystery. It's wide open. The jurisdiction of it lies in Dallas, Texas, and we don't know all the answers. And if anybody would take a hard look at this, they would find out that what we've been studying for the past 30-some years is leading us to an interesting answer to hopefully.
Maybe an answer someday.
Maybe an answer, because
Thank
it's
you
going to
both
get
very
there.
much.